Hello, everyone. Welcome to Change and Thrive. I'm your host, Dr. Wendy Heckelman, founder and CEO of WLH Consulting and Learning Solutions. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe and select the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss an episode.
Prior to the pandemic, top-level executives were uneasy about their leaders' ability to handle unexpected challenges. Would you believe that the study found that only 1 in 5 executives surveyed believe their leaders had the skills needed to achieve the organization's current and future strategic priorities? And that study is from 2018. Now let's fast forward to October of 2020. We've had a massive humanitarian challenge that has been created by the pandemic that has increased business challenges unlike any we have ever faced in our history. We've had abrupt dislocation in how employees work, changes in customer priorities and workplace practices, and ultimately what constitutes business performance, just to name a few. And as a result, leaders have had to shift and pivot and lead in expedient and ingenious ways. Now let's add the swell of social justice demands and everything else that has happened in our country. This unique moment requires a new set of leadership imperatives with great potential, with profound implications for how organizations function today and in the future. So in today's podcast, we're going to focus on a new leadership paradigm to help equip leaders for today and the future. I am pleased to have Dr. Loretta Kate, who is a member of the WLH team and co-leader of our WILL initiative. Welcome back, Loretta.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me today. You know, you're absolutely right. This is going to require a significant shift in both future business and leadership expectations. To begin the path forward, organizations are going to have to look towards bolder operations, much higher aspirations, agile ways of working, so much change that as organizations work through these changes, it's going to impact their cultures, mindsets, and behaviors, and those have to be led strongly in order to evolve across the enterprise. So incremental aspirations are just not going to be enough to deliver the results to the next normal. So in short, bold change must be managed boldly. So to achieve these goals and aspirations in today's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, or VUCA world, as we call it, leaders are going to have to understand and pivot quickly to address the challenges and unforeseen obstacles created by an ever-changing industry, environment, and workforce. Equally important is going to be their ability to demonstrate inclusive leadership capabilities and bring empathy to everything they do.
You know, Loretta, that is so true. And as you think of it, so everything we've seen over the last 8 months, this pandemic offers terrific empirical evidence of what is required for leaders for all times.
You're absolutely right. I think you and I have walked over the last several months and learned a lot about leaders in this time, and people are learning a lot about their leadership teams and organizations during the pandemic. So, you know, there's so much uncertainty in the world right now, and it's continuously changing before our eyes. But the one thing is for certain that we are starting to see some true leaders emerge above all the swirl. And these are the leaders who are modeling some very critical and what I'm going to call from here on out, non-negotiable leader behaviors that are going to be required to drive the enterprise success now and long after this crisis is over. In addition, the current research that I'm finding right now is bearing out a very strong business case in support of these same capabilities that are going to inspire followership, and we're seeing that happen. And that's going to be a non-negotiable to get people to achieve those strategic and cultural priorities and financial outperformance in the future.
You know, you really in this last couple minutes just set up the business case for changing the way we think about leadership and what's really important. And as a result, you know really well the work that we've been doing. We have a new leadership paradigm, which is steeped in the research we've been doing, and then the very current pandemic and what we've seen. And what we call it is the ABCs of leadership for all times. And it's really important to recognize that leadership behaviors individually are great, but collectively, they work together to make a leader strong and powerful and insightful and empathetic. So let's talk about the first of our ABCs of leadership. And the first one to rise above the swirl in its importance, and I don't think anybody would be surprised who's listening, is agility. And I want to take a minute and define what agility is. And agility is the ability to anticipate and quickly pivot in response to unexpected challenges, and to lead yourself with balance and speed and flexibility, and the ability to lead others through transition. So let me share a brief example of agility. We have seen organizations and individuals and leaders pivot during this pandemic. They've seen how the shutdown disrupted how and where employees work and customer workplace practices. And as experts who spend much of our time in the pharmaceutical environment, we saw a dramatic impact because healthcare systems were overwhelmed, and customer-facing roles who had always gone to visit doctors and physicians and institutions went from seeing their customers in person to 100% customer virtual visits overnight. And in addition, companies had to pivot their recruitment strategies from face-to-face interviewing and hiring and onboarding and training to virtual. And that took agility for leaders, for their employees, for training organizations. So agility is a critical leadership competency now and in the future.
And you mentioned earlier that all of these are connected in order to make a powerful leader for now and in the future. And this is the first example because as these agile leaders are scanning the environment, it's critical to understand what's happening out there and then to come back and take those insights and transition to action by revising their strategic direction. And breakthrough thinking is the next non-negotiable because that's required to creatively solve for the pain points and potentially unforeseen obstacles of the future, and to innovate where we identify unmet needs, and then streamline processes for increased efficiency. So let me give you an example. Since you're talking about what's going on in the healthcare industry due to the pandemic, think about the need for antiseptics, just walking into the grocery stores and there's nothing on the shelves. Well, my son-in-law, as you know, Wendy, is in liquor sales and came in one day and said, hey, guess what? We're repurposing our alcohol to give away these big 2-liter bottles of antiseptic. So I thought, that's breakthrough thinking. That's creative problem solving. And it worked. So just a great example of how all across all kinds of industries, we're seeing people step up to come up with solutions for unmet needs.
That's a great example. So we've got our agility, right? The ability to pivot and flex, and we have strategic thinking with breakthrough thinking to come up with new and novel ideas. And our next leadership behavior is collaboration. And not just nice collaboration, but collaboration that is bold and intentional across the organization. There is not a senior leader, a first-line leader, an individual that does not need to collaborate with others to get work done. And we know that if you have bold and intentional collaboration, you're able to harness the power of peer networks and leverage diverse viewpoints, build synergy, accelerate learning, and drive for better outcomes. The best example we could share that I think many of our viewers are aware of is for the first time in history, we are seeing unprecedented levels of bold and intentional collaboration to develop a vaccine by the end of the year. You have CEOs across pharma, the FDA, CDC, healthcare practitioners, institutions, government, technology providers, all across the world, openly sharing research, resources, and expertise and lessons learned to come together to think of a streamlined process to identify and produce a safe and effective vaccine. The speed and scale of this is unprecedented, and collaboration that is bold has been the critical success factor. So going forward, any leader needs to be bold in how they collaborate, communicate, and coordinate.
I think everything that's happened, that has been a source of the results that we're seeing. Now, you and I have always said that all leaders have to execute with excellence. And we're taking this to the next level. And we're going to call it dare to execute higher aspirations. And that is, it's great to come up with a plan, but if you can't execute it, it's of no value to you or the organization. So you're going to have to overcome those barriers to boldness that's out there, bring clarity to chaos so that people know exactly the critical few they need to focus on with intensity, and build commitment and accountability to drive higher success. And these are the leaders who are going to go big and get it done right now. And to do that, to have that ability to execute at 10 times higher their aspirations and do it 10 times faster only happens because they're agile and they breakthrough thinkers and they're bold and intentional collaborators. So they're able to make sure that people are proactively monitoring and recalibrating quickly. And if you think about how we extended healthcare during this time by ramping up telehealth, that's an example of achieving 175 times the number of telehealth contacts within this time period that was projected to take at least 15 years. So you can see how applying, daring to achieve these great numbers makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And any senior leader or any first line leader will tell you they've got to be able to execute with excellence, right? And that's to get it done. So let's talk about our last of the ABCs. And this one, I think, comes pretty close to the top, although they all are at the top and work independently, and that is empathetic and inclusive leadership.
Yes.
Ensuring that all colleagues are heard and understood, and creating a level playing field for capability building and advancement of all. I mean, one of the things that we have seen, particularly with our pharmaceutical clients, is not only do the leaders need to be empathetic and check in for their employees. You know, some of them went from working in the office to both husband and wife working at home, trying to figure out how to do homeschooling and all the complications that everybody has faced every single day. The need to check in with your people, the person, and see how they're doing. And the other area that we've seen, and we've been talking to our clients around this, is the need for empathetic engagement with your customers. You know, the days of just showing up and talking about your product are over. You need to really understand the challenges that your customers are going through and empathetically engage them. So we really believe that empathy and empathetic engagement is a critical leadership capability that will help leaders today and moving forward.
You just described the leader that we all want to have, for sure. And there's a reason why empathy continues to be cited as the number one skill leaders need for success. And we're seeing it now more than ever, right? Because those who aren't empathetic, they're not showing up very well. And it goes beyond connecting to understand what people are going through, like you said, and understand their perspectives, as well as the customers that we're calling on in our fields. But when you start to listen and pay attention to the questions they're asking you, it kind of gives you insights that you need to dig under the hood a little bit and do that with them and use inclusive decision making to come up with solves for that, so that they feel in on things right now and that their opinion is valuable. All those things are critical, just like empathy brings so much to inclusive leadership capabilities that are required for making sure that you create and build a diverse leadership team. So they go hand in hand, don't they, Wendy?
They certainly do. And Loretta, when we think about it, we've just laid out the A, B, C, D, and E, 5 critical leadership behaviors that when they come together really set the stage for a leadership excellence. And I really want to thank you for being on today's podcast and sharing your insights. I know that our plans in the next several podcasts, we're going to break down each of the components of our ABCs. So thank you, Loretta, for joining us today.
You're welcome. You know, my passion for leadership, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now.
Absolutely. So as we close out today's podcast, I'd like to recap a few key takeaways. One is that future business and leadership expectations are changing. With that, we're seeing a new set of capabilities. Second, our new leadership paradigm outlines the ABCs of leadership for all time. And 3, these capabilities build and strengthen upon each other and together have the ability to drive enterprise success during the pandemic and long after this crisis is over. So if you are an organization who's looking to really develop your leaders with excellence, please feel free to reach out, as we have a cutting-edge approach to developing these leadership capabilities that are simple, memorable, and relevant. And our Will Now approach and initiative goes beyond programming and works to address the systems and mindsets and behaviors that limit diversity in leadership, especially women and women of colors at all levels of leadership. As we close out today's podcast, have a wonderful rest of the day, and we will see you next week.